Hello, everybody. Welcome to my Daily Dose with Tim. Today is season 2, episode 42. And for the next few episodes, we're going to go into income properties. So it's not exactly a brand new topic on my Daily Dose with Tim. As you guys know, from season 1, we actually covered a little bit of it as well. However, I just really want to make sure that we still go over this in a bit more detail, simply because of the fact that I think income properties or rental properties is such a term that has been, I think that's caught a lot of people's attention. However, in a way, it has also been one of those terms that's overused and not been recognized enough. And more importantly, the analysis of how it truly works has not really been shared either. And so I just want to make sure that we dive a little deeper in season 2 as well with income property. So today we're going to just start with cash flow calculations. We're not even going to go into acquisitions, the financing, or anything like that just yet. Today, we're going to keep it as simple as possible, because if you remember, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what it is that we do and what we acquire. Cash flow is the most important priority that we focus on. Why? Because if you got cash flow, that means you got a viable business that can help you build long-term sustainable success, and in turn, long-term wealth. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Okay, first thing first, we're gonna look at where we can actually get our money from. So from a revenue streams perspective, I'm actually gonna write that out here. From a revenue streams perspective, for the most part, just because we are in real estate or in properties, most people know that we will have to charge rent. So hopefully that is right there for you. And depending on the types of property, the market that you're in, you might even be able to charge for parking as well. So for a lot of us here in North America, for example, some of the single family detached properties actually do have garages or parking spaces that's attached or built into the house or within the property itself, so within the land itself. Most of the times when it's a single family situation, depending once again on where you are, you might not be able to rent it out separately. And this is why I said it really depends a little bit. However, I want to further define, this specific topic here that we're covering. We're going to be talking about single family houses or homes. So homes could actually cover a wider variety of types of property as well. And what we call multi-unit residential. For some of you, you want to call it apartment buildings. For some of you, you want to call it multifamily, whatever the case may be. However, I want to make sure that the definition is very clear, because when it comes to investing, when it comes to deal analysis, definitions definitely matters. So that being said, let's keep going. Depending on the type of properties that you have, you might be able to charge for laundry, because if you own an apartment building or multi-family unit, you can have a laundry room or multiple laundry rooms built in, depending on the scale and the size of the buildings that you own. And you can charge for laundry as well. And that a lot of the times actually helps your numbers at the end of the day. Now, that being said, there's also a lot of people that get very creative, once again, depending on the type of buildings that you are in. Maybe you can put in vending machines as well. And some people will also say that, hey, you know what? I mean, in my vending machines, I don't have to sell anything else other than laundry detergents and maybe dryer sheets as well. So that's completely up to you. I know that there are some investors, they will also put in regular vending machines where you can sell chips and sodas and gums and candy bars and maybe other emergency items like Band-Aids and stuff like that. And so effectively, you might be combining two of your businesses together, because I also know there's a lot of people out there that go to a franchise show, for example, and they pick up a vending machine franchise. And if you own your buildings, they actually do complement each other quite well as well. So you can have your vending machines in there. Now, last, in this case, that's most common for a lot of us, is the advertising portion. It's really funny. Some of you might be going, hang on a second, why is advertising falling under revenue right now? It shouldn't be under expenses. Well, by advertising, what I mean really is some of the buildings you got maybe really, really good exposure. Remember the old saying, location, location, location. And in this case, honestly, location, in my opinion, is secondary, because first thing first, you need to make sure that you have that exposure on the side of the building first and foremost, because depending on the type of properties that you have, you might not have that giant space that will allow local companies or billboard companies to come in and put up a billboard on the side of your building as well. So if you guys think, the largest cities around the world, think about London, Toronto, Times Squares in New York, LA, Seattle, Chicago, Tokyo, Hong Kong, all these buildings, there's tons and tons of billboards where advertising space is available that's attached to the side of the buildings or the front of the buildings, even in some countries where space is very scarce. And so in North America, we're very used to the big land, bigger buildings, a bit more spread out. We do have that luxury. However, the point is, as a revenue stream, you might be able to have something like that as well, depending on the scale of your building, whether or not it's built for that. And don't forget, because I've heard investors and some students before, because they're like, oh my God, this is a genius idea. Because depending on where your building is, in some of the higher density cities or towns, you might be able to rent out that space for a pretty hefty rent. So I've heard right now, I mean, without going to the major cities, I've had students that are able to rent out the side of the buildings for $8, $9, $10,000 a month, sometimes even bi-weekly, especially if it's, let's say, during holiday seasons, for example, and advertisers are fighting for eyeballs and people's attention. And so what they ended up doing is that they buy the property, and then without checking with the municipalities, zoning departments, and safety codes, they decide that even though there are windows right there and venting, they just decided to reroute the venting and board up the windows, because they're like, hey, that's not important, because that window basically leads to nowhere. It's not part of the unit. It's one of the common areas or storage rooms, so we can just board it up, no problem, without checking and getting it rezoned and assessed by the city and approved, just because all they're thinking about is, hey, you know what? If I can make that plain wall on the outside happen, I can rent that space out for advertising revenue. And so they end up having to redo everything after they get caught, and you actually usually get a fine first. So just remember, okay, while this sounds great that you're creating another great income stream here, just make sure, step first, you have to check with your local authorities to make sure that your safety codes are still met, your building codes are still met, and it does make sense for you to do it. All right. So for a lot of us, this is where it ends. And once again, depends on the type of building and how you've either built it or when you acquired it, whether or not it comes inherited by you as the next owner. You might be able to also charge for storage. Okay. So these factors, they all become revenue streams for you as well. Now, let's go over to the expenses side. And I understand that leading up to this point, we're counting mortgage payments or debt servicing under expenses. I'm just going to tell you once again, when it comes to irregular income properties calculations, we do not count our debt service here under expenses. Okay, so our expenses are usually the monthly operating expenses. So what it takes to keep the building running, to keep the buildings well maintained. So first thing first, very, very straightforward, even though we're not doing pity right now, but PI is taken out of the equation. We are still left with the TI, which is first thing first, property taxes needs to be in there. And then property insurance definitely have to be there, okay? And then depending on, once again, the type of buildings that you have, you might have to pay for utilities, and utilities can cover a wide range of things. So for example, you can have electricity, you can have water, you can have gas, you can have sewage, you can have garbage, you might even be providing TV cable connections, internet, okay? Maybe even phones. I'm not sure who here keeps a lot of landlines these days, but you would have things like that as well. And then you go into the next category where I usually call maintenance and repair. So when you think about it this way, once again, depending on what your property is, I'm just giving you a general laundry list right now. You can pick and choose what numbers you actually need to factor in when you're running your numbers later on, okay? Because we live in Canada, so what that means is we live in what people call the Great White North. It's white for a reason because we get a lot of snow. And so snow removal usually is one of the biggest maintenance expenses, especially during the winter months. And with that said, I mean, it's not that we're covered in snow 24/7 all year round. We also do have summer as well, at the very least. Some cities still have all 4 seasons. So and during those the times where there's no snow that we have to remove, then there is lawn care or lawn maintenance, whatever you want to call it, okay? And then what happens after that is you would have, well, general repairs. So it could be just open space or public space. If you have hallways, okay, or general paintings that you want to budget for, and maybe you have, I actually talked about garbage already, so that wouldn't fall under here. We do budget in, for example, pest controls. Once again, it's not if, it's always when, especially when you go into a multi-family situation. Single families, not as often, however, it does happen because it has nothing to do with the building itself. It has everything to do with the people that you rent your buildings and your units to, okay? So with that said, a lot of people, other than these amounts, what they will typically do is they will just do a percentage. So that percentage now can also go into, depending on how you want to do this, it can also basically just go into what they call the reserve fund or contingency or emergency. Okay, so pick your favorite word here. Basically, that's what I'm saying. However, the other side of all of this is what I would like to call the admin side of it. So remember, every single property needs to be a viable business in itself. So I understand that if this particular building is held under one holding company, for example, and you have to build in the basic admin costs, and it definitely seems really, really high. However, the more buildings you have or more properties you have within that same holding company, then that expenses get spread. So let's keep going. I'm writing a little bigger than I thought I would today. So what's usually covered under admin? Well, if you're holding your properties under, I mean, forget about getting incorporated. Even if you do own it in your personal name, there is still additional accounting fees usually, because your accountants will take longer to prep your personal taxes either way. And then there's usually legal fees. And even if you don't have any legal fees you need to keep on budgeting every single year, I would still highly recommend that you do, because it's only, once again, I don't want to scare anybody. However, as you scale up, it's never if, it's only a matter of when you might potentially have to go into a legal dispute with, let's just say, a delinquent tenant or a tough tenant that you might have to pay the bailiff to get out, or pay lawyers to serve different papers, or to draft up eviction notices, for example. So sometimes, again, your municipality's templates may not be sufficient enough. So I would always recommend that you budget that in as well. And for most people, bookkeeping is huge. And the other one also is property management, which is a huge one. Okay, so property management, once again, you can do self-manage or you can contract out. Completely up to you, depending on whether or not the scale can support it. And under property management, if you do self-manage, then you probably want to get some sort of software to track it. Okay, if you don't yet, not a big deal at all. And last but not least, you want to account for bad debts. So once you get to a certain scale, definitely budgeting and bad debts would be highly, highly required. And for those of you who might be wondering what that would be, I'll give you an analogy. So for example, gyms, when they enroll people and they get gym membership. Some people decide to pay a year upfront. Most people will pay on a monthly basis. Either it gets deducted from their credit card or personal checking account. However, let's say when the times are tough, or they decide that they don't want to go to the gym anymore, and all of a sudden they just said, hey, you know what, instead of getting trapped in a contract, I'm just gonna do this not so ethical thing, in my opinion, and I'm just going to cancel my account. I'm just going to stop payment. Okay, sometimes that happens with tenants as well. They just decide that they're going to stop paying, and as a result, you might have to borrow some money if your building is not performing all that well already, or the fact that you might have to take a little bit longer to bounce back, for example. Okay, and last but not least, you also have advertising. Advertising. Oh my God, not able to spell again today. So advertising, basically, again, this is for your tenant turnover. So what that means is if you have to advertise to get new applications, new tenants to come in, that's where it would go into as well. So there's a lot of different expenses. It really depends on the type of the property and the market that you're in. And you know what, for most people, if you're leveraging single family homes, the list is usually a lot shorter. And if you're self-managing in the beginning, the list is definitely shorter as well. Okay, so next thing that I want to go into, because from a, I don't know why I wrote that out. So let's just finalize this part quickly, which is from our cash flow calculation. For our cash flow calculations here under income properties, definitely we have our revenue, and then we're gonna take out our expenses. And so what that means is we're gonna have something that we call the net operating income. So this is what we call NOI. And then after that, we will account for debt servicing. So as you noticed, we just call it debt servicing. That's the general umbrella, because again, a property that will cost somebody $200,000 to get into, even $50,000 to get into, if you're somewhere in the Midwest in the US these days, or if you're looking at a multi-million-dollar complex, for example, a lot of the times it doesn't just take one lender to lend you the funds you need to get the project going, to acquire it. And this is why we basically put that giant umbrella term of debt servicing under it, because you might end up getting 3, 4, 5, 6 different loans onto acquiring the building in the beginning as well. So this is why we call it debt servicing in general. And once you've done all of that, you get your cash flow number here. Okay, so this is how I wanted to start this whole topic with everybody here. Hopefully that was very easy to follow and very straightforward for all of you. I want to come back here now, just in case you didn't get a chance to maybe take a picture of this. Okay, so revenue has all these things. And if you have other ideas, questions, comments about maybe you're charging for something that I have not seen, then feel free to make a comment in the comment section as well. And same thing with expenses too. All right, so with that said, thank you for joining me again today. I hope you enjoyed today's daily dose, and I'm happy, very happy with the fact that a lot of you guys are sharing these daily doses with people, because it really just tells me that the message is getting spread, because what I really want is to help everybody increase their financial education through real estate as much as I possibly can. I know I only have about 17 episodes left with you. I wanted to do some mindset sessions about money, about investing. I'll do my best to factor everything in. However, maybe we'll just have to leave it till season 3 as well at this point, because there's so many topics that I still want to cover with everyone, and I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'm grateful for your support and your comments and your engagements. So once again, I would like to say, have a great evening and live well, everybody.